they wouldn't go arrest his son. When Bass got back into town from work, being on the road, he collected it and volunteered to track his son down himself. And he tracked him down and found him and turned him in, which was, he thought, the right thing. And his son went to the penitentiary in Leavenworth, Kansas. And I guess that story has a happy ending in that he was released early for good behavior. He never had a problem. Once he learned how to be a good prisoner, he didn't fight the system. He learned how to be patient. He learned how not to panic. Maybe things will work out, and he got some clemency from the governor, and he was released early. Bass Reeves ended his career after after Indian Territory became a state, Oklahoma. He lost, after 32 years, he lost his federal position as a deputy U.S. Marshal. And from 1907 to 1909, he was a beat cop in Muskogee. And he was downgraded. Because Oklahoma now was a state, they could incorporate some Jim Crow laws, and Bass Reeves kind of had a lowly beat cop position after his distinguished position as a federal deputy. And he was only allowed to police what was called the Negro District in downtown Muskogee, Oklahoma. But for 2 years, there was not one problem, one arrest that he ever had to make on his beat in 2 years. He was well respected. The community knew him. I'm sure he worked hard to earn their trust and communicated well with the community. But in his elderly years, due to a close range gunfight, he got shot in his leg, and he had a little limp. He had a cane, and he was very dramatic. I guess maybe he thought, I'm an old man. Maybe somebody thinks that I was a legend. Maybe I'm past my prime, but maybe this satchel will kind of create some discussion and fear. So he had a satchel of guns. Now, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 guns would have been enough to carry. He had a satchel, and he would pay a child to walk beside him or behind him and carry it for him. So he's walking around Muskogee with this boy carrying his satchel of guns. I think that is a fine way for a legend to kind of slowly fade out. And then he eventually died of Bright's disease in 1910, an inflammation of the kidneys. And that's how Judge Isaac Parker passed away, his good friend who gave him the job of being a deputy U.S. Marshal in Fort Smith, Arkansas. Anyway, do you have any questions about anything at all, Bass Reeves? We might be approaching out of time. If you need to leave, I understand. I'm happy to answer a question if you have one. Yes, Joe?
How did your view of the Old West change? When I think rodeo, something I learned is, like, when I think rodeo, you think of white cowboys, but this was, historically, right? But it was really vaqueros and black cowboys that were maybe over the campfire competing with one another. Hey, I can ride that steer, rope that steer. How did that change your view of what the West was?
Well, I guess I've been thinking of the West as the white man's West, but really it was the Native Americans' West. And the reason the white man thought it would be a good idea to finally give a gun to a black man like Bass Reeves was, all right, we got to face facts. These Native Americans like black people better than white people. Maybe they'll do a better job policing the area than we will. And so they gave it a shot. And I admire Judge Isaac Parker for being that open-minded. You know, I didn't know the West was that open-minded. So I studied the South growing up. I didn't, you know, I certainly didn't know black culture and history extended that far. I'd heard about blacks being cowboys. I didn't know about lawmen. And that totally flipped the script for me. So I think we should always be a little suspicious of history. I don't mean to say don't read it, but read it. But it doesn't hurt to check some other sources to verify what you're reading is actually accurate. A lot of our history, we can talk about colonial history. Oh, there are 13 original colonies. Well, yeah, I guess if you leave out the other 3, East Florida, West Florida, Quebec. But it's a better story to say, all 13 agreed. We won't talk about the 3 who were loyal or neutral. You know, our history is filled with propaganda, so we are marching to a certain beat behind our flag. Just be aware that there's a purpose for some people to twist the story, to leave out certain people out of that story, like Bass Reeves. And read as much as you can. Go to secondary sources to see if a primary source maybe just hit the highlights, like Cliff Notes or something, and summarizing too much. And look at those footnotes. Those footnotes have more information for you that's really unique than what's in bigger font on the page. Anything else? Yes.
I'm a historian, and how long did you say it took for you to gather the information to write the books?
So I gathered information for about a year before I started tinkering with the writing, but I was always reading as I was writing, or I was always, if I ever stopped, I could be writing well for a period of time, but if I had to set it aside because of school, because of teaching, work, whatever, and then I come back a couple weeks later, I felt like I had to read everything all over again, especially when I was writing battle scenes in the Civil War, to remember the placement and the context of what was going on. There's so many moving parts in a battle. Oh, that was a nightmare. That was tough. That was the toughest part, the Civil War. I had to get that right. That's what Taylor Sheridan, I'll compliment him. He let the showrunner know. He sent a message to the showrunner to send it to me. They were about to film the opening episode of Lawmen Bass Reeves, and it has a battle scene in there. And he said, ask Sidney, how many cannoneers are going to be here? How many soldiers would be in this, and where would they be on the field? I need to know how many extras I need. He wanted the history to dictate his numbers. He wasn't just rounding some up and hoping that'll be enough. And I can't say I'm glowingly proud of every single thing in the show, but overall I'm extremely happy and proud, and they do a really good job. I do a couple of things differently, for sure, but I'm proud overall, and that the historical accuracy, like with the battle scenes, and in many ways too, very accurate. There are a couple of places that look inaccurate, but it's all due to editing. Sometimes, for the sake of time, they would cut a little scene that had some context in it. And in Indian Territory, liquor was banned. And in the show, it shows Bass Reeves walking it looks like he's walking off the street into a saloon in Chakota, Oklahoma. And it wouldn't be, but it was a speakeasy. It was supposed to be like hidden in the back of this hotel, and if you knew about this little private passageway and have a secret word or whatever, and okay, I can see that's legit. You could get away with that since it's secretive. But when they cut out, oh, it's a speakeasy, and it looks like he's just walking right off the street instead of a little secret passageway, it looks like the show doesn't even know, and I didn't know. None of us knew that you couldn't have a legal saloon in Indian Territory at that time. So there are a couple of things like that look like they're inaccuracies, and I guess they are, but because something was edited out that explained it.
And how many books did you publish about Bass Reeves?
3.
3.
So it's a trilogy. The first book covers his early life, Follow the Angels, Follow the Doves, and until it goes until 1862 during the Civil War, and it has a cliffhanger kind of moment when he's rising in determination to be free. And then the second book, Hell on the Border, is at his peak of his career in 1883, 1884, when he's arresting some of the most notorious people that he arrested or had to kill, and that has a cliffhanger as well. And then there's a third one. There's a little hubris there. You know, it's easy when everything goes right for you to sort of just think it'll always go right. And so Bass Reeves has a challenging moment in his life at the end of book 2, which is historical, and then the third book, he proves to be a great Greek hero, not just a tragic figure, and he has a redemption story, tracking down his own son. And I think he earned a lot of respect that he didn't have in the community with that. And that should have just been just the final nail, so to speak, not on a coffin, but on an historical marker of this man's life needs to be preserved for posterity. And he ended up being whitewashed for over 100 years for reasons you can imagine. Any other questions? I hope I answered you fully. I can get on. His life seems so epic. I could get in the world and forget why I got in the world and start telling something about him and wind up coming out of a different wormhole. So sorry about that if I confuse you at all. Any other questions? I really appreciate your patience, your attention. Thanks for coming. Thank you for having me.